Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and I'm a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph, and this is Pines with Aquinas. In this episode, I thought that we could do a little bit of what would you call it? Like meta-discourse. So talking about the thing that we're doing, because we're on YouTube, we're watching a YouTube video, but I thought that we could talk about the way that we watch YouTube videos, or like the way that we visit YouTube, because I think there are a lot of subtle snares that are set for us by the YouTube trap, and it's best that we not fall into them, because the goal here isn't just to consume content like a bunch of monsters. The point is to grow, the point is to heal, the point is to elevate. And yeah, if we want to cultivate the habits of mind and heart, which set us on a path towards holiness, then we need to be able to use YouTube in a way that conduces to that holiness rather than subtly detracting from it. So let's think about how we approach YouTube in such a way that we don't risk losing our souls. Boom, let's get after it. All right, so it doesn't really merit consideration, the fact that YouTube poses obstacles to your spiritual growth. I mean, it's a revenue-driven platform, so it's going to try to get you to consume more content, regardless of what that content is, and to ensure greater and greater consumption or greater and greater engagement with the platform. It's going to try to stir you up, right? So it's trying to make money. In order to make money, it's going to direct you to topics or to themes which are most likely to engross you or to captivate you. And here we just see the natural outworking, or the kind of the logical consequence of advertising culture as we have come to experience it in the last 100 years. Perhaps you've heard the story in its rough outlines that a lot of psychologists and like mental health professionals were employed in the lead up to and during the Second World War on the U.S. home front, so as to convince people that they should support the war effort, whether by volunteering or by contributing in some other way. And then a lot of these folks, having refined the science of promotion and advertising, then went on to found the modern advertising business, which we would associate with like Madison Avenue in New York. So we know the fact, or we are accustomed to the fact that we deal on a daily basis with like weaponized psychology in the form of advertising. And on YouTube, it's a refined science because there's so much data, and the data can be wielded in whatever way YouTube sees fit. So YouTube has an algorithmic pattern ordained to its own ends. It doesn't want you to become a better person. It just wants you to become a more YouTube-y person. So it's directed towards deeper and deeper engagement. And when it comes to advertising, advertising is largely directed to getting you to desire things that you didn't know that you desired, or to like kind of creating or inventing desires in your heart. And in this process, it will often prey upon your passions. So we know from other videos that we have passions, or sometimes called emotions, that these are part of our animal life, and that when taken up in our rational life, they can become humanized. And more than that, they can become virtuous, right? We can actually train or discipline these passions in such a way that they help us to become saints rather than posing an obstacle to our pursuit of sanctity. So on their own terms, passions or emotions are kind of morally neutral, but as they become incorporated within human culture, then they can take on a moral quality, whether virtuous or vicious. And when it comes to YouTube, it seems that, obviously they're making appeals to love and to hatred, to desire, to aversion, to joy, to sadness, these kind of simple, passionate responses. But it seems like the ones that get most traction are the more complex, passionate responses, the ones that, the ones that are attendant upon the encounter with some difficulty. Okay, so when we list these, we usually describe them as hope, daring, fear, despair, and anger. All right, so it's like there's something out there, it's either good or bad, but it's difficult to avoid or it's difficult to obtain, and so our response to it has to be, somewhat more complex. And those are the types of passionate responses which really involve us in something. So I've identified three. 1, fear. 2, anger. And 3, despair. And maybe these resonate with you a little bit. Fear. You see a lot of things on the internet, on YouTube specifically, about like the war, the pandemic, political unrest. And I think a lot of that is it's for the purpose of stirring you up, because it knows that in order to settle down, you're going to have to go back to these types of things. So that way you can feel like you're, up to date. You have all the latest information. It's fascinating. Like for people who drink a lot of coffee, for instance, coffee no longer has, like a stimulating effect. It actually has a relaxing effect. So people who are addicted to caffeine will need to drink caffeine in order to go to sleep. And I think it's something similar here with fear. We become addicted to fear. anger. We could say, again, similar things of anger, but a lot of YouTube videos which are dedicated to highlighting how people are stupid, to trying to move within us a feeling of outrage or even of moral superiority to those in our culture and our society whom we deem to be destroying it or making it to rot from the inside out. And then the third is despair. There's this typical tendency that you find where things are terrible, they're getting worse, I can't do anything, and so all I can do is passively consume content so as to ratify this phenomenon in my interior life, which is fascinating. All right, so I want to just kind of present to you a very simple encouragement, some practical things that we can do when engaging on a platform like YouTube, so that way we won't get sucked into this death spiral of fear, anger, and despair, but rather we can highlight, or we can acknowledge what's at stake and still use the platform for our virtuous ends, so as to grow in virtue, simply. All right, so we want to recognize what's happening, how we're being appealed to, and then how we can control that appeal more or less effectively. We want to cultivate some serious self-knowledge, right? So that way we're critical of the way in which we're approaching the platform, engaging the platform, so that we can be, reconciled to certain strengths and weaknesses of our own personality, so that we can ultimately, transcend those. Well, specifically transcend the weaknesses, but then fortify some of the strengths. And I think that a kind of overarching theme of this whole process is that we want to reinfuse reason back into our habits, back into our habits of mind and heart. Reinfuse reason into the discourse, reinfuse reason into the engagement, so that we can reorient it to God and regain a modicum of control if we've lost control, or retain control if we haven't. So my 4 suggestions to you are: 1, control the environment. All right, 2, recollect your mind. 3, discipline your heart. And 4, wield your agency. All right, again, control the environment, recollect your mind, discipline your heart, and wield your agency. Simple things, but I hope these will be of some service to you. So 1, control the environment. I think from the outset, Matt is big on covenant eyes, but also I think that content blockers or ad blockers in general can be super helpful for just getting certain things off the table. All right, so just bracketing certain temptations, or kind of slimming down your browsing experience so that way you are bombarded with fewer occasions for clicking off the course that you have set about to pursue. So some people have some questions about how ethical ad blockers are on account of the fact that a lot of these websites, gain revenue from advertising. I don't think you have to worry about that with YouTube, because they're getting the revenue. So I would say a content blocker, something like Covenant Eyes, right, which is going to protect you and your family from things which might otherwise threaten you. And then ad blockers, I think, are just a good, simple way to slim down the experience, so that way you're really engaging with what you want to engage with. And I think when another way in which to control your environment is to be cognizant of the dispositions with which you approach the platform. All right, so sometimes people approach a platform because they're looking to unwind, or because they're looking to distract, or because they're looking to self-soothe, or because whatever. A variety of reasons, all right? We should be cognizant of the fragility, of the weakness of our own nature, and also of the woundedness of our own nature. So that way, when we reach out to the platform, we know what it is that we're looking for and have some sense of why, all right? So maybe you're not getting enough sleep, and you're doing this because you need to stimulate every however so often, so that way you can continue to do your work. Okay, but why aren't you getting enough sleep? A good thing to be cognizant of. Not necessarily you can change it tomorrow because your character is infinitely malleable. It's not, all right? But still, it's good to be cognizant of those things, because I think the Lord uses that cognizance to work the work of transformation. Also, maybe you're approaching the platform because you're sad, because you miss your friends, because you're assigned someplace far away. He says, all of us receive assignations. I'm talking about myself here. Or because, you're whatever reason makes it such that you cannot hang out with your friends in the ordinary course. And so you're looking for communion, right? You're looking for entertainment. You're looking for delight. You're looking for joy. Okay, good. It's just good to know that, because this is one way in which you can control your environment. All right, so those are my 2 simple suggestions for this point. You can control your environment by, content blockers or ad blockers, kind of slimming down the experience and bracketing certain temptations, but also to be cognizant of the dispositions with which you approach the platform, so that way you have a sense, why am I going here? What are the desires of my heart? Doesn't have to be super philosophical discourse. Just know, like, am I sad? Am I looking for distraction? Am I looking for dissipation? Am I looking to forget? Am I looking to remember? Am I ... Okay. Next, recollect your mind. I think that it's good to come to the internet with a sense of purpose. All right, you should have the scope of engagement before your mind's eye with some concretion, with some determination. Because the internet is a tool, but it's a peculiar tool that can become potentially all things. And as we approach the internet, and if we do so without a sense of our scope, without a sense of our concrete determinate purpose, then we can just get caught up in this instrument which becomes all things and permit it to drive us rather than driving it, okay? So I think it's especially dangerous with entertainment. I like watching movie trailers every once in a while. And I think that, one movie trailer will suggest the next movie trailer, and you can spend, however many minutes just watching movie trailers. But why are you watching movie trailers? I mean, all of us maybe not all of us. Many of us like watching movie trailers. That's why I like to get to a movie when I go out to a movie theater on time to see the trailers, because they're great. But if you approach something just with the desire of being entertained, there's no limit to that. There's no term to that. If you approach food with the desire of being filled, at a certain point, you can't eat anymore. But when you go to entertainment with the desire to be entertained, that can go on ad infinitum. People die playing video games because they forget to eat. Not a lot of people, but some people. So if you come with a purpose, if you come with a scope for concrete and determinate engagement, all right, then I think you stand a better chance at using this instrument in the way that you hope to, okay? So if you're just coming because you're tired, if you're coming because you're just sad, if you're coming because, okay, frame it, so that way you know what to expect, and that way you can assess along the way whether or not YouTube has in fact answered to your needs. So that's the second one. Recollect your mind. Third one, discipline your heart, okay? Discipline your heart. So here we can just be, again, super, super practical. Let's say that you have some latitude, you have a home work arrangement or a home office arrangement. You have some latitude as to the breaks that you take and how often you take them. I would say have a clear and concrete sense of when you take breaks and for what length, okay? There are probably psychological studies which, probably describe, the optimal time to work and then the optimal time to break. I'm sure they're out there. I don't really care too terribly much. In my case, I know that after an hour of sustained reading on a difficult text, I get fatigued, I get weary, all right? And so I think that's usually a good opportunity for me to take a break. My go-to break is coffee. I usually just go get a shot of espresso or just a quick little, 6-ounce cup. Other good ways in which to take a break are to answer emails, okay? Because if you constantly have email going on in the background, then it's going to just kind of distract you from, and you're never going to be deeply engaged in the work that's at hand, all right? So that's a good thing. I know that Archbishop Chaput checks his email for like the last 5 minutes of every hour. I may have that slightly wrong, but I think that's basically true. But then if you're the type of person who watches a YouTube video throughout the course of the day, I would say have some sense of limits. I'm going to watch it with this frequency, this often, for this duration, okay? And then I think that you should kind of promulgate that law to yourself so that way you don't transgress it without having any cognizance of what it is. So make a law, promulgate it to yourself, so that way as a prudent thinking individual, you don't have to constantly be reassessing. You can just kind of have this thing before your mind's eye and be like, yes, this is the rule that I made for myself, so I'm going to keep to it. And then I think it's probably a good idea just to have YouTube blocked as a matter of principle, because then you put a layer between you and engaging with the platform. So that way you're less likely to do so in a spirit of fatigue or in a spirit of wanderlust. As the Germans don't say, it turns out, they actually have another word to describe wanderlust. That's just something that we say, which is taken from the German, which the Germans don't say. So cheers to you. So I keep YouTube blocked in the sense that I think I have some program, and I forgot what it's called, Simple Blocker. So that way I just have a list of websites that I don't want to visit with any frequency, because when I go to those websites, I get either angry or sad or etc., right? So like whatever. ESPN.com is on that one because I spend too much time thinking about the prospects of the Philadelphia 76ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. NewAdvent.org is on that because I get sad sometimes about the state of the church. And then YouTube is on that list because I just don't want to spend time like looking at like comments on videos on whichever channel, so that way I have blah, blah, blah. I'm like stirred up about things that could be done better. It's like, okay, it's good for me to know feedback, but I shouldn't look in the comment section. Okay. So I would say probably good. This is part of disciplining your heart. And then I would say when you're on YouTube, recognize indulgence when it crops up. So sometimes you're just watching videos because it's fun to think that other people are less intelligent than you, or to despair at the state of American political discourse, or like maybe you're just like sliding over particular thumbnails to get a little play out of this or that thing because you find this person to be attractive, and you know that the only reason that you're doing so is because you find this person to be attractive. Okay, so if you find certain indulgences that are cropping up in your practice of the use of YouTube, be cognizant of those things, all right? And then, seek a certain modicum of discipline in the way that you approach it and ask the Lord for it. All right, so these are all to be collected under this third point, which is discipline your heart. And then the fourth and final one, and this is the shortest, is wield your agency. So I would say do the things that you set out to do and then do them well and then only do them. So if you're going on YouTube to watch a video with Pints of the Aquinas, cool, all right? Do that, watch it, and then click off, and then get off the platform. Because you could do any number of things on the platform unto ages of ages and might providentially discover a good video which helps you down the road. But the chances of that happening, I would say, are not excellent. And so I would say approach the platform with some sense of purpose, wield that sense of purpose, and then bop off the platform. And I would say when you go to YouTube often, you're going there as a passive recipient, as a passive observer, but I would say try to be more active in your engagement with the platform. So that way it's not just something that you see as relaxation or like vegetation or evacuation of all responsibility. So if you're watching a YouTube video about the faith, take some notes, share those notes with a friend, suggest it to somebody else, and then discuss it afterwards. Wield your agency. Okay, so if you're going to engage the platform rather than just sitting yourself before it and then, come what may. So again, those are my suggestions as to how one might approach YouTube without losing his or her soul. So again, control the environment, recollect your mind, discipline your heart, and then wield your agency. So it's, I suppose, a bit strange to make a YouTube video about how one approaches the watching of YouTube videos, especially when I'm recommending a little less perhaps than you might ordinarily be accustomed to. But I think ultimately it's for your growth and holiness, right? It's for healing, it's for elevating, it's for the glory of God and the salvation of souls. And in that sense, it makes perfect sense. So again, this is Pints of the Aquinas. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel and push the bell. That way you get further updates when videos come out, and you can be more deliberate or intentional as you engage with the platform. If you haven't yet, also do check out Godsplaining, which is a podcast to which I contribute with 4 of the Dominican friars. Cool episodes coming out on the reg weekly, and then some guests, and then some live streams, and then some cool other scriptural meditations and special series as they present themselves. So do check that out. Subscribe on YouTube or on your podcast app. And then third and finally, I wrote a book. That book is called Prudence, Choose Confidently, Live Boldly. And you can find it wherever books are sold. But it's about a lot of the themes that we treated in this video, about wielding your agency specifically, about being an agent in the world, a protagonist in the world, rather than just somebody to whom life happens. So that's my prayer for you. I'd ask your prayers for me, and I'll look forward to chatting with you next time on Pints with Aquinas. Cheers.